Airbnb.
40,000 Airbnbs in New York, but rampant abuse.
The National Association of Realtors sounding the alarm if the economy continues to show
Dozens of units as kind of shadow hotel rooms.
I'm an Airbnb host, and I'm responsible for the housing crisis. And no, we don't care. We don't care about poor people. It might seem lonely up in this penthouse, but me and these $100,000 geos, we're living our best life, looking down on the rest of the world, including the W Hotel, peons. Because Airbnb hosts, we're all just so rich. Okay, I'm done. That was a joke. For real. Let's ask, has Airbnb actually destroyed the housing market, or at least influenced it? Let's look at the data. There are 660,000 Airbnbs in the United States. Thank you. And there's 143 million housing units in the United States. So with that math, 0.4% of all housing units are on Airbnb. Harvard also did a study that says for every 1% of the housing market that goes on Airbnb, home prices will go up 2.6%. And rents will go up 1.8%. I think it's important that we validate this with an example using Dallas, just so you know that this is what they mean with the study. This study is pivotal for the argument on whether or not Airbnb is doing a lot of damage or a little damage or whatever. So let's use Dallas, smaller data. Dallas has almost 600,000 housing units, apartments, homes, etc. Dallas also has 5,500 Airbnbs. There are two scenarios that people argue. One is that they think that Harvard means that 1% of Airbnb growth means that home prices will go up 2.6%. In Dallas's example, that means 55 houses would increase home prices by 2.6% since there's 5,500 Airbnbs. The alternative is that Dallas would have to double its supply of Airbnbs in order to raise home prices 2.6% because there's 5,500 Airbnbs and almost 600,000 housing units, roughly 1%. So let's look at dramatic examples too. Let's say that there's a place that only had 100 Airbnbs in the whole city, maybe because of regulations or something like that. If 10 people bought Airbnb properties, would that raise New York's prices by 2.6%? Because again, in New York, Airbnbs are illegal. And now that Airbnb's been made illegal in New York, this is a great example. Where there were tens of thousands of Airbnbs, there will only be hundreds now, which means that relatively Airbnb's presence has gone down 1% at a time fairly dramatically. If they've lost 70% of their Airbnb supply, that means that home prices should go down 140%. And that's not true. So that's a great example of this logic, which means that Harvard's study meant that 1% of the total housing supply going to Airbnb would raise prices by 2.6%. So if the whole United States has 0.5% of Airbnbs, that means that the housing prices have gone up on average by 1%. This is a great argument for me as an Airbnb host, but that's not exactly true because it's regionalized. Not every city will have Airbnbs. There are cities like Sedona that have over 10% of their housing supply is on Airbnb, which means that Sedona properties have gone up probably nearly 30% because of Airbnb in Sedona, probably Joshua Tree, Chattanooga, Tennessee, places like that. But there are cities that have almost no Airbnbs and they have no effect. And while we're looking for criminals in the housing market, let's talk about landlords. Out of the 143 million housing units we have in the United States, 50 million of them are owned by landlords. But here's the rub. 30 million of those are big institutional investors like BlackRock. 20 million of them are your mom and pop landlords, which could still be people who own dozens of houses, but they don't own thousands of houses. And this is the argument of Walmart, if you really think about it, guys. Walmart can put all these small business owners out of business based on price and efficiency. BlackRock can outbid regular homeowners any day of the week. They can steal houses from people because they have efficiency, they have the capital, they have the data, and what they pay for their debt is way cheaper than what you'll pay for debt. Mortgage rates are over 8% for the first time in, 28 or more years? That means that your mortgage rate is probably going to be over 9% if you're an average person because you don't have a perfect credit score. Speaking of, credit defaults at a generational high. Late car payments are at a 28-year high or something like that. That's why I'm shorting Tesla. And late rent payments are skyrocketing too. All of this has created a perfect storm where people are scared. Landlords are giving 2 months or 3 months of rent for free. Reventure Consulting just covered that. And that's without you even asking. As you guys know, I teach how to get free rent, but we have to ask for it. This is just advertised. And since we are dipping into this further, let's look at the real criminal in the housing market. Let me grab two knives. Britney Spears. Little Britney Spears dance while I cut my squash. Inflation has raised home prices since 2000 by 67%. From 2000 to 2020, because that's what that study tracked. There's another study that shows how much home prices have gone up since 2020 because of COVID, roughly 40%. When you combine those two data sets, we're looking at 110 or 120% increase in home prices because of just inflation. But for some reason, people here on the internet want to go blame landlords and especially Airbnb hosts for stealing all the housing supply and making it expensive. If you're an Airbnb host, you should feel good about yourself because you're fighting the system, if you think about it. Landlords have to own 20 homes to get maximum upside $5,000 free cash flow. Maximum. In California, people don't expect to have free cash flow. And for those of you who don't know what that means, free cash flow is where somebody pays the rent, you pay the mortgage and other stuff, and you have cash left over. Most landlords in California buy homes just to pay down the mortgage. They don't expect to have any cash after that. But an Airbnb property, you could have one Airbnb property and you can see $10,000, $15,000 per month net cash flow, which means if you wanted to make a business out of real estate, you can have a lower impact on the rental market or the real estate market by owning one or two. And you can make way more cash than a landlord ever would. This also makes you more resilient. If you're at a time where mortgage rates are nuts, like they are now, and it's hard to hold a property and service the debt, you have to make more cash on that property. That's the only way we can beat BlackRock because their debt is cheap. But if you Airbnb'd your property instead of being an LTR landlord, you'd make so much cash that there's no way that BlackRock could ever get you to let go of that property. There'd never be a reason why you'd want to let go of that property. But more responsibly, you're doing this just to 2 houses instead of 20 or 30, which means all the people that hate landlords would hate you 5% as much, right? Because you have 1/20th of the properties. This honestly is really good logic. And the reason why we need to consider this as Airbnb hosts hodling our properties is because if BlackRock continues to get control of all the single-family homes, they can set rent prices and they can set housing prices. Think about diamonds. Did you know that 90% of the world's diamond supply is actually in storage somewhere? Lowering the circulation of diamonds, driving the price of diamonds up. It's nuts. Airbnb doesn't even register on the top 20 reasons why home prices are nuts. You know, rents actually went crazy after COVID because people didn't want to have roommates anymore. They were so sick of having roommates because of quarantine that they all moved into individual spaces that were all their own. That's snapping back now, and that might be one of the reasons why landlords are cutting rent prices, because people are finally consolidating back into having roommates again. And if you're watching this, I want to congratulate you because a lot of people get angry about a topic and they choose an enemy, somebody that they can yell at. Left versus right, red versus blue, and they do no growth after that. They just want to argue until they're blue in the face with somebody else, no matter what the data says. It has to be narrative confirming data. And you're listening to something now that might have not been what you were expecting to hear. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. And I'm going to leave links down in the description so you know I'm not just blowing hot air about this topic. I don't own any properties, by the way. So me defending landlord Airbnb hosts is no interest for me. I don't buy stuff. It's not my vibe. And since I rent properties, I do want to say that it's a very exciting time that landlords are cutting prices and they're giving away free rent. When I got started in 2015, my first 3 Airbnbs, I got 8 weeks of rent for free up front before I knew this was negotiable because the building was giving it away. They were giving it away because in Houston, oil dropped like some insane amount and Shell was firing people and ConocoPhillips were firing people. And Houston being an oil city, they were scrambling. And because they were laying off all these workers, downtown just didn't know how they were going to fill their units. And that's how I got my first 8 weeks of rent for free. This is happening on a national level. So if you do arbitrage or have considered it because mortgage rates are insane, it's 52% more expensive to buy than rent here in Dallas, for example, meaning that arbitrage is the better path to do Airbnb right now, hands down, because home prices will pull back, mortgages are nuts. If you do arbitrage, you can also get a couple months of rent for free. It's super crazy. But this is my rant. I would love to hear what you think in the comments, and I'll argue with you too. You guys know I argue in the comments. I'm sure you enjoyed that. So I will update you on the real estate and rental market to the best of my ability as it applies to Airbnb, because that's what I'm here for. And if you want to learn how to get free rent from landlords, free rent, or allow you to do Airbnb, you're in the right spot. I've got a playlist on pitching landlords, short-term rentals. Watch that. Thank you so much for watching this video. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.